You all are going to go all the way through summer, aren't you? Not change a thing. Just go ahead and let everybody run the scam on us. Not start calling it out. This is BTWRLM228 on Pastcast and Prodcast. My comments before a long time ago, I said, don't get riled up with the point of going out in the street, because it'll be a trap. And in the last week, we've kind of seen how that plays out. And you're going to be on the wrong end of the stick as they take you behind the woodshed with it. I wasn't even going to touch this that much, but there was just too much that started coming up that's central to what we have to start being able to cut through. We have to become a united voice in opposition in the right way. And not buy into the sides, the different divisions that they keep throwing in our face. And we tend to try to either ignore it, or we talk around it, or we try to talk reason to it. And it's a set-up insanity, and you can't speak to that. We have to learn how to denounce certain things. And again, learning a more proper approach. If we intend to try and keep any measure of control of this thing, which is essentially our life, it's going to take a whole lot more than commenting in a chat room or even me telling you about it. Big things are afoot. I'm not sure what's the scam anymore, what's the diversion. Maybe it's all becoming a diversion while the scenario that's been planned out plays out for us. As I've explained to you, we identified one back in 2013 pretty clearly. And I said there's others. And we've been knowing that the division's coming to the United States. I've told you all that's going on overseas, over the pond, in the Middle East, was a reflection. As contorted as it would be, it would be coming home to roost, and I think we're seeing that. What I'm talking about and referencing here is the Charlottesville so-called riots, the so-called Charlottesville vehicle running down. In a way, I don't even want to talk a lot about it, and I probably won't, but I do need to make some observations for you. If you haven't made them for yourself, and if you have, then fine, and then we have to move out from there on how we're not going to be not sucked in, because it's just one thing to sit back and not be sucked in. It's actually starting to take, it's having to take and make the example of what the clear voice is. They want to focus the narrative. Whoever is pulling this off, it was predictable. So I know someone's doing it. It's coming. And I wasn't going to talk about it until I saw this video that was saying that this Challenger or some kid in a Challenger ran over some people. And then I saw some video supposedly of a drone, and the vehicle that I see coming out of the intersection isn't a Challenger. It's a minivan. And so I realized there wasn't a lot of the story that was really being told, and what was being fed to us is all the things they were setting up. And sure enough, you start looking at some of the facts, and not of all of it's making a lot of sense, but the one sense it does make is that it's a setup. And we need to start calling it out. As I look at this stuff and see the underlying angle, they talk about, we have in the United States of America, we have the melting pot. It's typically referred to as, the Statue of Liberty, and I think there's a statement on that about the melting pot and bringing our huddled masses in. Now remember, that's not the Statue of Immigration, as I understand it. It was the Statue of Liberty. Notwithstanding my contention about what the word liberty means. It was a place where the melting pot was originally, that is diversity. The problem was that it wasn't supposed to be by someone's opinion about how that was going to work itself out. And notwithstanding my disagreement with the current court system being corrupt as it is, and provably not an opinion, we proved it. and how all that law is rule o' law, not actual law. We're not really under law. We're under someone's rule about that, and it's an occupying force of many different type of complexions. That we are being driven to be divided while the condition gets worsened. And what am I talking about here? Not much different than from before. I told you a long time ago, I said they're going to have to get rid of all the evidence of the treason that Lincoln did. The crime that Abraham Lincoln was. And that has been in these monuments. And I have said, and I'll say it if you have never heard it, the South shall rise again. It has nothing to do with slavery, has nothing to do with what we are told was history. It has to do with somebody decided that they were going to amass an army to take out sovereign people in their sovereign countries called states. And they were effective. And we got that answer. It's why I tell you be careful when you think you're going to go to a Second Amendment and do anything. I told you Lincoln gave us that answer. And I think they're attempting to get rid of every vestige of the evidence of Lincoln's treason. And they're doing it. And I find it interesting no one's standing up to it, even though, as Gary L. provided on his broadcast in the state, there's a law against these monuments being brought down. Now, there also been charges filed and levied against a bunch of people who did that. My question was, well, the cops saw the rope going around the statue's so-called neck, the representation of a neck. Why didn't they stop before the crime was committed? And this becomes the other element of what's going on. We don't have just two sides. We have quite a few sides. The police, the government itself, the military occupation wants to see this go on because they want to foment this supposed division, this fabricated division. I'm not supporting either side at all. I'm looking at a problem. I'm looking at a way of life being destroyed, the memory of a way of life being destroyed. And I'm talking about that republic, if we could keep it. And I'm referencing from the fact that I can see pretty clearly how that was supposed to go through our land laws, our disposal laws. It's a whole different analysis than what we're told over a whole time. I've been telling you that we're living under an occupation. It's a military occupation. We're not talking about a job here. We're talking about an international law occupation of your territory. We were already supposed to be a melting pot society, which is diversity on its name, but we didn't quite turn into that completely mixed pot of stew that was non-discernible from each other. That was where we could all come together under law, not someone's decision of what their opinion of law was, but the law. And we would have our ways to defend ourselves when someone attacked us and live in peace at some level. But what we're looking at is an imposed diversity. And I see that as by any other name smells as foul. And we're watching the failing of an experiment. That experiment they told us that the United States of America was. Yeah, the Republic, if we could keep it. We're watching it. We're watching the last throes of it right here. And it's not just the way the people fight against themselves, because you understand there's a financial construct behind all that as well. But it comes out and it's telling you that this is a fomented thing, and the people can engage if they want. And people who honestly believe they want to support Nazi regimes, Nazi ideologies, and opposing others that want to fly the hammer and sickle, I have no problem with all of them doing that. But when it starts to destroy and cause harm, and then be used to destroy and cause harm in other ways, I start to have a problem with that. Turns out, as I suggested before, be careful. Don't jump in the streets and riot. Go into the seats of your offices. In other words, where they were having problems with these monuments, and the monuments became a problem, instead of the counter-offensive being a rally, as permitted as it was, to go in the streets, it should have turned around and went back into the seats of decision and said, you folks have the authority to arrest those that are challenging those statutes, or make a public notice that it's a crime to pull them down. I'm not here to discuss the veracity of why that was even done in those states, that those monuments, all kinds of monuments, not just Confederate, were supposed to be maintained. There's something about maintaining memory that I think is important here at least. But I'm not here to discuss whether it was right or wrong for those laws to go in there to protect those monuments. The point is that when the people in the government didn't step up with those laws to protect the statues of whatever they were, then you have a problem with the government's aiding and abetting these crimes against us. When we find out that, as the report comes through exclusive, FBI admits federal informants linked to deadly Charlottesville riots unlikely to face charges. And why would they, folks? I mean, this is the military coming in, a military operation. They foment this thing, they actually help it on, and their informants are not going to be hit, even though they were right there. And see, you're duty bound, if you are in a system of law, you're duty bound to arrest felonies that you see and not become a part of. But this is how fallen our whole society has become, that we hear this and we won't address or redress it at all. We have the right of redress. We don't ever use it. We don't stand up for it. And then we don't get together in the proper way. Again, I've suggested you should not go in and riot in the streets. It's going to be a trap. It's set up for your fall. And you'll see how the so-called Antifa can't define its own self, but is criminals, are terrorists. In fact, I can't see any difference between what they do at the monuments and beating up people that aren't their faith. If you don't say their faith good enough, they'll stab you. How it's not much different than the Taliban we've heard about in the Middle East, or is. And I've told you that was the mirror of the Middle East is going to be here. It's coming, folks. It's here. It's not coming. It's here. I told you that. I'm really disappointed to see it, but it's the fact. There's nothing I can do beyond that. Nothing I can do. I can just tell you to engage against it, but in proper ways, not like you see standing in the streets, where they set up a condition where this kid runs into a mob. But interestingly, the way the story runs through it is that he ran his car through the mob, and that was where I come in. He didn't run it through the mob. He actually didn't even seemingly run it into the mob when you start looking at what was going on. But the Justice Department has announced that there's a federal probe into their informants that were involved in the riots. They're finding out who, what, and wheres, and we all know the end result of that will be to whatever end the government wants to bring it. The FBI, for all y'all that are out there that are in these groups, listen, this is another reason why you didn't want to be involved, and you wanted to find another way around. The FBI has intel assets implanted in several white supremacy sects, as well as the radical Antifa group, according to federal law enforcement sources who spoke to these people about this report. You're being set up. No different than the people that set up the FBI that sets up mentally inferior people to go do this. That's the class of people that they're dealing with, and that's the class of people you all are who are going in the streets and allowing yourself to be reduced to this sort of nonsense. Maybe you all are being paid to do this. So it's a big setup anyway. It's a completely big setup. But apparently we read the story and we read more about this information about this kid running it into the group. He ran into it, not through it. It's very important to start understanding what went on. He ran into the group. But the problem is he ran into the group and he actually runs into another car. There was actually two more cars going into this area where these rioters who didn't have a permit were actually obstructing the road. They had no right to do that. Ironically, the ones with the permits were the ones that were beat up and beat down, and the authorities allowed that. And so there's a dynamic here that's certainly not true, but it's certainly along the lines of the plan that's our problem. And we find out that this kid that went into the crowd down this road. And what got me was I saw a van coming out of an intersection from a drone shot, and it's hitting people, and it looked like slow motion. People were rolling in front of this van, all like in slow motion. It just didn't look real to me, the video. And then I realized, well, the van doesn't even have any body damage on it at all. How does this kid's car come out of this hallway, out of this street backwards, and its whole front end is destroyed, and the glass is all broken in? He was the third car in line, not the first. And he's backing out of a street, the video I saw. So how has he got all this damage? Well, he ran into a street. He didn't see the cars apparently in front of him, and he bashed into the rear of a second car. By the video that's there, I see a couple people laying on the street, but I don't see anybody dead. I don't see anybody actually stuck there. We see another video later, and actually that black car ran into those first car, and then it started to be pummeled by the Antifa people, breaking glass and threatening the guy. And it sure seemed to me on one of the first videos I saw, this kid's actually backing up to save his life. It comes out that that's exactly what, that's exactly what it looks like he was doing. And the people he runs down are the people that jumped on the back of his car to try and beat his windows in. Nobody stopped to help the accident. No, they decided that this kid was a problem. Well, how'd they find that out? Well, we don't really have this connection, but there was also a report that this kid had been being chased by Antifa from another street. He's pretty much going through the roadway trying to get through and get out, apparently, and these people are chasing him down for whatever reason. Now the government comes out and beats down on the so-called white supremacists, those that self-claim, in favor of diversity and in favor of no hate, no racism. In fact, they're actually imposing it. And I guess my mind just stops right there. We can be dismissive of all this. We can take a side or not a side. We can not even pay attention to it. This is a function of our downfall. This is the tool. This is the weapon against us. There has been not law one I can see actually imposed as it ought to have been to protect and keep the peace. It's been allowed to foment and create this idea that there's something wrong, and actually feeding into our fallen nature as a people. And I'm not saying that any of that's not there. What I'm saying is that we have to be grown up enough, be responsible enough to deal with our problems, our differences amongst ourselves in a peaceful manner. There's just no way to get around that. Otherwise, we are at war. So there's another story. I can't tell you I know it all. I can just tell you things weren't making sense to me. And I tell you when things aren't making sense and you know you got yourself a pretty right mind and a critical thought, then the thing is that you're looking at is really nonsense, and you better start looking closer. Only to tell you to try and instruct yourself what the more probable reality is, because all these things are coming down to get an agenda to be pushed through, and there's a couple of them going. I'm already on record a long time, years and years, about this military occupation against us. I've also on record about the Lincoln is only a lawyer, he's a problem. That he has evidence in these statues that were the downfall of the original idea of this country. You live, folks, for all the people that want to claim to be different than it, this. And I saw a feed through minds.com, and I entered into a feed. Everyone's trying to point fingers at the other people, thinking how dumb and stupid they are, and not pointing out. And I came in with Title 42, Section 1981, and said, all y'all are all slaves to this system, and while you fight, your masters laugh at you. And I documented every bit of that in that post. All you had to do is click a link and go read it for yourself. All y'all will pay exactions of every kind and no other in this state, whatever one you want to define it by, whatever word, and you are on a plantation as a slave underneath legal servitudes equally. Title 42, Section 1981. Go read it. And so we're all in this. As long as you fight amongst yourself, as long as the prisoners are fighting amongst themselves, the warden loves it. The warden actually has cause to come after you harder. One guy who just happens to come up now, probably the voice we actually need, is now gone from us. He just died. Dick Gregory. I didn't know too much about him, but whatever I heard from him over time, over my life that I can remember, I always found him to be an intelligent teacher, essentially. An intelligent insight into the problem. And one of the questions that came up last night in the news that he had died was this. Remember, he was a comedian, He had an interesting way of bringing out the problem and not creating more, inciting more instigation of the problem. And he brought a message if we would listen to it. One of the things that are written in the story about what he'd said to a group one time while he was before a bunch of Southerners, and speaking on race relations. And see, race, to me, race is kind of a funny word. I think everyone's missing the point. I've told you the Doubleday Dictionary, the word race has, for his example, is the race of lawyers. And so color has nothing to do with a race. A race is simply an identifiable group. That's why I told you I'm a racist, because I will eat the last chicken if it means my life. I will take out the whole race of chickens if it means my survival. And to some extent we are all racists. But we look at, are we racist to the point of harm? Well, to the chicken, I guess we are. I haven't solved that problem. I don't like that, but that's what I got to do. Why? Because I tested that. No chicken in my life didn't work. And so race is only an identifiable group. And so that is also then conditioned by however you might redefine and regroup, classify something. So we have this tool in us to really cause trouble for ourselves, and we have to rise above that. But Dick Gregory made a comment, and I think it's poignant here. And may he rest in peace. Again, I appreciated his intellect in coming to state these things in a history long before I was even thinking about stuff. He was already in the world seeing we had a problem and doing what he thought he would do. He was a guy who went on fasts to try and protest things peacefully and to bring notice to things. But he made this comment. This isn't a revolution of black against white. This is a revolution of right against wrong. And right has never lost. I want that to be a resounding statement to everybody. I want that to be repeated to everyone. What have I told you, folks? Go find the wrong you need to make right and make it right. Because right has never lost. What have I said about how we go through this land disposal law and the government attack and beat down of everybody? We found the narrow path of the law of the land, and as long as we stay on that narrow path, that we cannot be defeated. It doesn't mean the criminal stops being a criminal, but we are not defeated. In fact, I've got to get, I can't really say too much. I'm waiting for some proof. It sounds like we've got a miner that used the information on our Jefferson Mining District website to defend himself as a miner on property against the government, against the federal government successfully. When we stay in this law that everyone wants to throw away, we do have a protection, notwithstanding the corruption of the government itself. This isn't a revolution of black against white. This is a revolution of right against wrong. That was a statement from Dick Gregory long time ago. Nothing has changed, folks. This is the other thing I found about his words will stand the test of time, at least until we end these things. Now, in this rioting that went out in the streets, and I told you don't do that because you're going to be set up for the takedown, go into the seats of decision that are causing and allowing this to be a problem. Learn how to give them notice, learn how to do the suits if you want, learn how to impeach them from office, learn how to just do a public, talk about shaming, shame the officials for not getting involved to stop the nonsense. And you use the objective basis of the law for that so that no one can just start making their opinion like you're doing as they do in the streets. We had lots of eyewitnesses to what happens in the streets, but none of them are good witnesses because it looks like a lot of them are informants that are preferred witnesses for the agenda of the government. And eyewitnesses for what purpose? because it's never going to apparently go to a trial because the FBI is all over this and planned. That's federal imposition, federal military operation in your state, folks, if you haven't figured that out. It's been planned, it was set up, and it's done for a reason. I can't begin to tell you exactly what that reason is. I can tell you that it implies quite a few reasons. All of them no good for the people. As long as we keep focusing on incidental little things that are blown up, molehills, little spots of dirt that are blown up to molehills that are blown up to mountains that are really nothing, we're not going to get beyond. We are not an aware enough people that we deserve to have a republic to keep, is what I guess another problem for me on this. I don't, again, I look around, are we worthy? I don't think so. I know we are worthy, but I don't think that we're playing our responsibility out. And so, I guess I've said plenty there. There's so much to say and nothing to say. If this isn't self-evident of what the problem is and how we need to solve it, I don't know. If you're up against a mentality that's not capable, then you got a different problem. You better deal with that mentality. What's the saying? There's no one more foolish than the one that can't see. I mean, come on. And so we see this set up. This kid may have been running for his life somehow, got himself in trouble, didn't realize that it was some cars in front of him, ran into the car, backing up, getting the heck out of there because they're beating his car up. Why only his car? I guess is the other thing. I don't know, folks. It's just nothing makes sense on that. And yet I see what sense it makes as I see a destruction of something I predicted had to be destroyed as a memory. I told you our memories are very important in all this. They want to get rid of them. And then they put a false framework around what's going on. And they take your mind away from being able to know what the principle was, why you even were there. And what is the new normal is that deviance that's normalized. I've talked about all this in the last few broadcasts, apparently as it comes on to me. I always find it kind of interesting to look back over I don't know what I'm looking for forward. I just pull stuff together each week, but I look back and I see how relatively integrated my broadcasts really are for those of you that really pay attention to that and go back and tie those together. I think I'm, if I'm so bold to say, I think I'm a very rare voice out in all these types of subject matters, and how true the continuation continues and it's predictable, and how to avoid lots of these by our direct interaction, by enforcing what should be right, not by our opinion what should be right, but what is right by the objective basis agreed to by all of us. Again, narrow path, relative to the highways. A county steps up in its power over its county roads. All in the same week as this other court case I'm waiting for the information on. The county steps up and makes a streamlining process for the county to control the roads when there is a closure. The government, that's the way the government's supposed to work. It's not supposed to attack people. It's supposed to keep things functioning. The laws are there to do that. The laws are there to avoid the inflammation of the boil on the butt of America. And no one seems to want to relate to that. No one wants to step forward and account for that. No one wants to assert it. No one wants to group together in the proper way and go in behind the lines and go into the seats of power and assert those things against those people that have the obligation and duty to do that. And I think enough. I can go on, I guess on and on. It'll be just a broken record. We're either going to step up against this or not in the right way. I don't mean go out and riot. I mean go out and say, what the heck are you folks doing that you allow yourself to stoop so low to be looking like some mental patient? That you let these other folks in the office of the government get away with that nonsense. Tear down the problem of our lives, which is the federal government interfering with our state government, and now we can't even see that state government's any good because none of you stepped up there. It all becomes this big wash of corruption. And yet we're all eyewitnesses to it. And so what good is an eyewitness if there's not going to be a remedy? And when you find out that the remedy is very difficult, if not impossible to get at, isn't that another violation as well? Right on its face. And I hear crickets. So moving on with eyewitnessing, there's a lot of eyewitnessing going to happen here and tomorrow, I suppose. I did want to touch something because it's kind of a serious matter. Really neat. I've got to, as I grow older, I get less and less impressed. They're impressive in some regard, these eclipses and things. Although I thought I saw one here just a few years ago, standing on a porch. Just a few years ago, I thought I saw an annular lunar eclipse of the sun right before sunset. And so I don't know how special some of these are, but it doesn't matter. Those of you that are looking at the eclipse, all eyewitnesses to this thing, the key on eyes and protection has got my mind. Be real careful with this thing. It's really a public service announcement. I got a link for you in the Blogcaster for the total eclipse that NASA's putting out. Lots of information. Really, I'm focusing on your eye protection. Be careful of whether or not what they offer you in these cheap throwaway lenses are any good for you. I used to use a welder's helmet, but I don't know if the new fangled ones that are triggered by a spark of light will work or not. But the older style non-changeable welding helmets I used to use, and or other things. There's other types of things you can put together, but most importantly, probably best just to make a pinhole camera with your two pieces of cardboard. It'd probably be the best and easiest way, and you can adjust the size by moving the second. Use one as a screen, and the one that's closest to the sun, you put a pinhole in the cardboard that's closest to the sun. In the left, whichever hand, and you can adjust the focus on the screen cardboard on the back, and look at it that way. Even then, you might want to use sunglasses to look at the screen one. So it's very serious. This will kill your eyeballs quick. And don't let the little ones don't let them look unaided. Help them to make sure they understand that. So I guess I just wanted to. The only thing I want to talk about the eclipse is that. Neat stuff, but it's only going to be a strip. And for those that get excited about it, great. Go ahead and knock yourself out. Be careful. The countryside in smaller towns is going to have some trouble with traffic. It's on record. They're already planning for this. That's a really big deal for small towns throughout the lower population countryside. They are not set up for this kind of an influx. So be patient with everybody. And enjoy yourselves nonetheless. But watch your eyes. Don't be careful not to trust what you're handed as a free device to be looking at that sun. It may not actually stop the ultraviolet. Will flat kill your eyes, flat fry your eyes. Let's not have any accidents there, please. Another thing being eclipsed to hit the news here. The chief strategist of Trump, Steve Bannon, who was brought in to the White House with the victory of Trump, has now resigned. Big political movements going on in the White House. Pretty interesting how I don't understand how any president is supposed to get anything done, but that's the plan. You see the dynamic of politics working. Right now, and I think it's an important lesson to learn about how control is wrested and how function is diminished, and really how we really have to be more paying attention to certain things. But why it's even more important to get involved locally on what you do, and then it doesn't matter what the Fed does if you know to keep it separate. No, returning back to the miners, this I understand it. I'm going to have to be advised later to what it actually says. But locally, a miner has private property against the federal agency. So if I can separate that out, now the federal agency is it's not a factor. Now you see how in a lot of instances you are protected by the law from these oppressions. But Steve Bannon is out of the White House now, and his statement is the Trump presidency that we fought for and won is over. So here's the fickleness of politics, and there's now going to be another division started up with this Bannon dude going now. He's going to go back to Breitbart, and he's going to take with him all those that felt were in his race, a group of people believing the way he did. I'm not saying good or bad. I'm saying we have divisions being developed daily on many different areas. And if we don't get a handle on those or be able to work through those and to denounce the divisions, we aren't going to be fighting what's right. We are going to be enveloped by what is wrong. Bannon went on a discussion here. After confirming his departure, Bannon said that we still have a huge movement, huge, whichever you want, and we will make something of his Trump presidency. But that presidency is over. It'll be something else, and there'll be all kinds of fights, and there'll be good days and bad, but that presidency is over. And whatever you thought about what that presidency was, he's saying it's over. Now we have to wonder what was on the inside. It doesn't look like the swamp got drained too well. The stinking abyss is still sucking in things, and it's pulling in now all the way out to Charlottesville. And we're going to watch this stinking abyss just absorb everything if we don't start working better to stop it. Whatever's going on in the presidency, again, is not going to help us. To me, I don't know where that puts what we're doing. We haven't been getting any response, but we still have ways to now put more pressure because of this lack of focus. Like I said, I don't see how any president, I don't care who they were, could work with this sort of political chaos within any organization. And so apparently the only way to make some kind of progress at all, we are going to go more progressive, is that they go more centrist, if they say, as I understand they say it. So, eclipsing the White House now is the caucusocracy. They might call it the deep state. I'm not sure what it all is. It's a whole lot of wrong going on that we're not going to see the proper angles, and then you start seeing it's like from the frying pan into the fire. There's how this president has to respond to all kinds of things going on. I don't understand, but he is. And then when he responds one way, there's going to be a group of people to find the other way. You're watching the destruction by division of anything, and they're all feeding into it. And part of my mind is going, yeah, well, we already knew this was a reality game show going into this administration, didn't we? Was this like the Game of Thrones or something? I don't even know the program. I just know the name. I see lots of people wanting to talk about it. Don't want to talk about our own Game of Thrones in the real world. No, we'll talk about the one put on the screen. And this is dog eat dog, big time problem, and it's going to envelop us in a not so nice way generally. And so I've been working, my colleagues and I, we've been working to try and get back some of the law of the land in order to bring back private wealth, and so we can have a buffer against what they're bringing down upon us in the caucusocracy or the debt system. That's partly how they do that. So in this eclipsing of that presidency, we have a purge of Bannon, and almost everybody that Trump had in there now is gone in preference to someone else. And when you look at their background, that background is not much more than better than what it was before, if not maybe worse, because now they're on a mission. They had a mission before, but now they're on the mission. Now they realize how dangerous it is. Now we're moving from into purges, moving into another subject matter. Purge begins. Those of you that would talk about all this, and even here behind the woodshed, although given we are with our Real Liberty Media, we're isolated a bit. But any feeds that maybe Vince might put up over on YouTube might be threatened, and that's why for those of you that are listeners, support the broadcast, support the network, RealLibertyMedia.com. There is coming a purge. Now it hits Cloudflare. Cloudflare terminates the service to Cody Wilson, GhostGunner website. I don't even know these people. The point is that there's a politically motivated censorship purging going on with certain types of content. They went after with Charlottesville. You see, this is the springboard. You have to understand how this is working. The springboard was Charlottesville, and it started with a website called Daily Stormer. So, and we all know the demonetization of YouTube. We also understand that the corporations realize that Google's not really providing the type of service that they were paying for, and so there's been a big shakeup. And so now they've been trying to figure out and blame their I think it's lies. Bot clicking is just a fraud, and however they set that up, they've been trying now to save face, I suppose, and so they're blaming it on so-called alt-right, anything they don't agree with. But what they're going to be left with is going to be alt-left, and I guess that all the corporations can agree to those words, or you're going to watch unicorns on rainbows or kitties, if that's what you want to do. They're just going to make TV out of Google or YouTube. And the point is I think one of the things is our pocketbook is a good place to start. Loud and clear, say that any company that continues to advertise on Google or YouTube will not enjoy your business with them, because they are agreeing to censorship and the dumbing down of the public and the public discussion. But neither here nor there. We still need independent or non-dependent places to go, and Real Liberty Media has been that with Grimner, keeping this pipeline open. And so you better start paying attention on who you're going to support here, on how this goes through. A lot of people are worried about monetization. I haven't been. I've just come here. In fact, I kind of throw a lot of it off. I've just thrown down. The FRN literally has no value to me. I know it has value to things in the world, but I have no value for it. If I could get away with it, around from it, I wouldn't accept them. I wouldn't. I don't put no really. They can be laying in the street unless I was needing for. I would probably hand them to somebody else. I don't strive to get them. I don't strive to engage the monetary system. And so I do all this, and I don't look around, because everything you're going to attach into is going to attack into you. It's going to be hooked into you. You're going to have to be in the system to do this. And so I decided a long time ago that I would not engage it. And so whenever I see it, even though I hear about it, what Patreons and PayPals and whatever all that stuff is, the Steam it, even if that's a scam or not, I don't know. I don't even participate in it. Maybe to my fault. The Bitcoin, the cryptocurrencies, same problem. A lot of you don't maybe see it and don't agree with me, but it's here. It's a problem. It has its good, powerful side, but it's not being managed that way. It's not being driven that way, and that's a failure on our side as well. But there's a purge going on, and so information to you is going to be further curtailed by these big conglomerates that are giving you the view of the world, normalizing whatever deviance they want to say for you. And so there's a shakeup going on, like lots of things. I think it might be healthy. I don't know the longevity of some smaller places. As I've told you, I've signed up to BitChute. It's a web torrent, they say, web torrent powered thing. I've got now Minds.com, which seems to be doing really well. Not tons and tons like I see lots of other people, but it seems to be doing really well in getting the word out of the broadcast after I make it. So that was that's been a good thing at that level, just to get the word out to people. How many people are listening for how long? I don't have a clue. But this is our problem. Are you going to listen to Antifa? You're going to listen to the Nazis? You're going to listen to the riots? You can listen to even alt-right media, even alternative media. You're going to listen to all of it and keep listening, or are you going to come behind the woodshed, learn the principles, and turn around and say, okay, I'm going to at least stop some nonsense where I'm at? I'm not about telling you the news. I'm about telling you what the condition of the battlefield is in this weekend war report, as I do every week now. Why? Because they said we are at war with this thing that we're up against. No matter where you look at it, there's a war going on. It's not my decision. It's not my blindered view. I don't care where I go, there's someone who wants to interfere with me, and I've realized now, by my research and reading, they have more than likely have no right, because I'm not a criminal. I don't go where I don't belong or shouldn't be. So if they're in my face, they're the ones doing something wrong. Now that wrong may not have a place to have a statement. It's going to be censored out. So Cloudflare is a service that does that for people. And this is going to be domino effects as whoever these people are that are trying to prove a point, are attempting to go after apparently corporate or commercial money, and they want to make it look like their house is squeaky clean. And it's not. It's just going to be more confined to a particular viewpoint that won't serve really anybody. And so my thought is anybody who wants to continue to buy any business, who wants to continue to do business with these corporate digital corporate providers need to be so-called boycotted, and let them know, because you advertise with Google, I will no longer buy your stuff. And then you be true to that. Find the alternatives. You want to be the alternative media? How about just be the alternative to the corruption? See, again, as I say in a lot of my tags, this is beyond media. This is only looking at the media so-called to show the notice of what the battlefield is and where we are, where they are relative to where we are, and what we may have to do. I say may only, that's what your decision. Where do you step up? And that you have to, whether or not you do or not, is the other problem. So this many underlying agendas, the same so-called, well, I don't even know if it's liberal. I don't even know what these terms are. These people, so-called progressives, whatever they think they're doing. Black Lives Matter. Dick Gregory, a black guy, said, no, black lives don't matter. It's what's wrong and what's right. That's what matters, folks. Now, there may be an argument over what's wrong and what's right, but if you stay out into the objective basis, as I've been suggesting to you, that comes along pretty quickly. Let's start with all the clear-cut black and white that's being violated, and then we'll see, maybe we'll have a way to move along. We'll have retrained ourselves to work better with ourselves. And why we shouldn't make certain decisions to do certain things, and why we should move in other ways. It should be telling us, even in our ignorance, we should move in more gently, but persistently to solve the problems and not make an excuse. So while we're getting destroyed left and right by using division, the so-called progressive side, the non-constitutional, the consensus-based insanity, the new normalizers are making legislation in every one of your states in order to condition what you had as rights antecedent the government. And I was given this link by Grimner, particularly. I didn't respond to it then. I just figured I'd talk a little bit about it now. And again, I can't get too deep into it. It's just these things that are going on right underneath you're staring right at the problem, and it's starting to work right below where you're staring. And that's all you're doing is staring with your mouth gaping open. And so these people get away with stuff. And these things are clouded underneath the colors of authority. And until we start seeing that and actually start to move against it, not because it's a cause, a movement, but because it's a wrong that needs to be righted. As I've been saying for years, from my research, what has to come out of this. Until we focus on that, we're not going to make much headway. And while we're not making headway, the people do this. The new law lets police confiscate guns, quote, without due process, close quote, if someone reports you. Critics of the new law argue that it takes away an individual's right to due process by confiscating his or her gun based on a single complaint. And that complaint, they're saying, could be done by a cop who decides that he wants to make an affidavit in order to go and get your gun. Now, I didn't do a great deal of analysis on this. The few things that I'm seeing that I see there's some problems with the way the story's being told here, versus even the statement on the text of the law. But it does look like it can be used, and it will be normally. They give themselves just enough license to cause the gray area for a cop to say that you are a problem. Do that ex parte before a judge, and the judge sign an order to take your Second Amendment right to keep and bear over some belief without hearing. Now, it said without probable cause. If you look at the law regarding this, it provides for this supposed hearing where someone complains that you need to be conditioned with your right to bear arms, typically some problem, domestic abuse problem. I told you they were using the women, the children, and the indigenous to do this. This is abuse of the woman, and this is really that stems out of how they abuse men early on, men in divorces and taking the men's right to their own offspring. This is a part of that continuing. This is the same idea. They call them extreme risk protection order. So you're all underneath this protection police state. It's actually a military state. They say it is for purposes of including imminent risk of suicide or causing injury to another person. When you find out the injury potential to the other person is the cop himself or herself, then you see how fast this all devolves into being a pretty quick way to divest y'all of what the Constitution says is prohibited to the government to interfere with. And I talked to you last week about how you work on that. I also told you these so-called progressive ideas, these new deviance normalized conditions are what you have to listen for. And here it is. The governor, I believe herself, says that she supported the bill. She's an attorney, and she's worse than Kitzhaber, the guy we sued to stop. He was bad. She's worse. And I told you, remember, we got all this common sense gun legislation. I said, where do you see common sense as a limitation on the Second Amendment? But here it comes, calling it a common sense life-saving bill that will help protect Oregon's women and children by closing the boyfriend loophole, preventing convicted stalkers from buying or possessing guns and keeping guns out of the wrong hands. They always do this very interesting idea about what the wrong hands is, and then they'll decide what the wrong is. And I look in real quickly, and Grimner's reminding me of where this law is, and I'm not wanting to highlight that. It's Oregon, but I did want to highlight that because this is going to be a generic sweep across the country. You see, common sense was the same stuff that was coming out of the East, wasn't it? Common sense gun regulation. Well, there is no actual common sense gun regulation. It's not provided for in the Constitution, providing you have an antecedent right to protect yourself, even if you're a stalker, even against the government, and to make felony arrests when the government goes bad to a felony level. So they call this now the closing the boyfriend loophole. But remember, I told you that the knot is tied in the barrel of the gun in the plaza of the United Nations, who uses women and children and the indigenous to advance their globalist, deviant normalcy policies that undermine your constitutional established governments and your life under law and not the rule o' law, which the attorneys foist on you. I hope you follow that. I keep talking about it over and over. So she says it right here. It's Oregon's women and children. The UN uses women, children, and the indigenous. It's partly what I don't know why. Maybe it's going to be a thing that sticks with me a while. Why that no DAPL thing, DAPL, no DAPL, that really troubled me to no end, that the native peoples, if I can call them that, I don't even know what they'll be insulted. They'll be triggered because I use a name to entitle the race of people that they have defined themselves at instead of just being people. That they would not listen to reason in law in order to protect themselves. No, they were standing underneath the attorneys that already knew they didn't have a position, and they would run to protect the women, the children, and the indigenous as an environmental protection. And I told you that was a setup. And what came of that, folks? I have nothing against the people in whatever they want to classify themselves. But we're being used, all those classifications, all those divisions, all those grouped races. It's just ideological races, if you understand. It's not people at all, if you really pay attention. They're being used against us to defeat us at every turn. They're doing it again here. So when you look through, there's a provision that we're not supposed. There's a constitutional provision before this, and I'm going to have to tell you, the Oregon LegisLooters have made and do make over and over again, and we have no way to stop it right now because there's not enough of you all stepping up. A few of us is not enough. We're doing good to stalemate a lot of this, but not enough to stop it outright. They do laws, they make laws anymore, so-called laws, that in their text are void on their face. In this instance, it appears, and we found this in the mining laws and in the water laws and in the patent laws, that the state legislators are making laws that violate the constitutional prohibition against impairment of contract. They also violate the ex post facto provision when you factor in your relation back doctrine, all right, to your property rights. Like I keep telling you, it's antecedent. And they also violate the Bill of Attainder prohibition, and a subset of the Bill of Attainder, the corruption of blood, is the lesser, where they don't kill you, they take your property or your rights. That's the bills of pains and penalties. Now, so this purports upon someone's ex parte, one-sided discussion before a judge, so-called, goes to the bar member to ask them this, on their belief that you have some problem, that they can unilaterally divest you of your property or your rights. So let me quickly go over. So this is what they do in these states anymore, and no one speaks out. And so this new normalized deviancy is carried on to bigger and greater heights, and more and worse detriment to us and our way of life. Well, so I'll leave a blogcaster link to a Bill of Attainder just to read it back so you understand what these things are. They're sitting right there. The legislators don't care about any of this because they have control, and they don't have, and it's like one side party control, and the other side party is letting them have it. And I know this because we've offered the solution to a lot of this, and nobody, the Republicans or the Democrats, do not want to resolve this control condition under color of legitimate government. Okay, this is how this is all working, folks. I don't know if you appreciate. I'm not just talking opinion here. I'm telling you that we use these observations all the time. We are nailing these people left and right. There's just not enough of us. Just like Thomas Jefferson said, the mass of educated people are what preserve that liberty. Bill of Attainder, also known as an Act of Attainder or Writ of Attainder or a Bill of Pains and Penalties, is an act of a legislature declaring a person or group of persons guilty of some crime and punishing them, often without trial. Now, what they're saying in this bill for this gun confiscation is, well, the trial is before the judge on an ex parte hearing before a police officer, a military officer, claiming that you've done harm or you're at risk. But when you understand, when you read this Bill of Attainder, the trial, and you read some of the court cases, a Bill of Attainder, so it's not a bill of pains and penalties. It requires a trial. That requires a jury. In particular, where you have the state, you see the government says that $20 is the limit. So when they say without a trial, ex parte, somebody making an affidavit to an ex parte court judge who's a bar member, who sings the praises of the Bar Association, who sings the praises as a non-government, well, they are governmental organization. It's a NGO style, where they are actually part of the UN, which in its plaza has a knot tied in the barrel of its pistol. You aren't going to be getting much favor here, it seems, going out the gate. But it requires a trial, not a summary trial, a trial. And that's so you avoid the Bill of Attainder problem. So they want to claim that you go in and you're going to have a trial before a judge, but you don't actually get that, apparently, from what I read in the bill quickly. That would require them impaneling a full-blown jury and to listen over whether they would want their rights interfered with that way. As the attainder resulting from the normal judicial process, the effect of such a bill is to nullify the targeted person's civil rights, most notably the right to own property, and thus pass it on to the heirs. That's the corruption of blood in the Bill of Attainder. The right of title nobility, which is the repealed 13th Amendment, if you go look and research that up, gave the titles of nobility to the lawyers to give them some special status. That's been removed. You'll find it was enacted by enough states to pass it, but what you have is a replacement 13th Amendment on the federal side over titles of nobility. But that wasn't supposed to happen. And in at least an original usage, the right of life itself. Bills of attainder passed in the Parliament of Henry VIII on 29 January 1542. 1542, if you thought this was just happening and can be changeable, this has a long history, resulting in the executions of a number of notable historical figures. The use of the bills by Parliament eventually fell into disfavor due to the obvious potential for abuse. They killed people here, folks. It's beyond potential. And the violations of several legal principles, most importantly, the right of due process. The precept that a law should address a particular form of behavior rather than a specific individual or group, and the separation of powers. And so we have a special group here, are these groups that they've identified. And they haven't had a judicial hearing on each one of those presumptive positions. No, they leave that to a so-called officer to make, or some official to make that accusation. They're already doing this in child services to steal your kids. They're already doing this in community care, folks. This is just more teeth in how they're coming after you. But you see, most importantly, the right of due process. I told you a long time ago, you may have only one right left, and that is due process. Notice put in simple terms, that's notice of a problem, opportunity to respond to that, and a time and a place to respond. That's what you'll see in every notice you're given has those basic elements. And you better respond to them. That's how we keep things labeled. That's where I tell you make your record. Identify who you are versus who they claim you are. Know what your rights are to demand them, and find and identify the failures as duties owed to you that are also then become felony when they do take your due process rights or your property. And so this Oregon law that talks to these, they make it sound like they're protecting women and children, and that you're a risk, risk to the society, may not actually pass muster, and a lot of these bills are not, to my way of looking at them, where they're supposed to be, these jury trials are not a menial thing that can be just tossed away, but they do toss them away. In fact, the miners, the problem with the federal agencies, the miners have so much power with their land being private, and which is under state law then when it's privatized in the disposal. The federal BLM has tons of trouble trying to get a miner to be given proper lawful notice that there has any harm. So what they've resorted to is just trying to negate the entirety of the due process that has to be afforded every property owner or everyone with rights. And we've lost the memory of how exacting a lot of this is, and it's been covered over by how complicated it's been made by this bar association occupation. But what we see in this gun thing, to me, is at least a bill of attainder. If you understand you have an antecedent right before the government, I see that as an ex post facto imposition. They try to make police power parameters, but they're doing it without due process. They don't have an order for you that actually defines that you are an insane one that needs to be protected, that are committable, are a threat, notwithstanding any domestic abuse thing. And I'm saying that almost hesitantly because I realize that men have become crazy. And the women have made them that way. So we have some troubles, but we're going to have to resolve those as well. People are dying left and right. But protecting the gun is not necessarily the problem here. Kind of like the problem they're having with prohibition and alcohol and alcoholics or drug users and drugs. You prohibit, you actually cause more. We're a funny creature that way. You actually cause more of a demand. So this, to me, it appeared pretty quickly that this confiscation order, despite what they say about the so-called due process, wasn't actually the due process that's required under the law, and it's working as a bill of attainder. Most of you, if you might be interested to hear that, but for the bulk of you, it probably doesn't mean anything at all. Why? Because you're not going to look at this and say it's a threat to you. You say, oh, that's not going to happen to me. So what? Until the day it is, or your offspring or your friends get attacked. And you say, well, now, what was that guy behind the woodshed? What did he say? Well, he said something about how to do this. And then it's too late because now you get overwhelmed. As people who thought that I deal with people all the time think that they have an understanding on certain things, and it's going south on them big time, and they find out how quickly that they don't. And that's a real big problem. And sometimes we can catch it, and sometimes we can't. So going back about the government fomenting all this stuff, it just keeps shoving it down our throats, and we just keep swallowing it. Gulp, gulp, gulp. We heard before that Charlottesville had informants from the FBI working inside all this on both sides. The government always seems to have its agents involved. The big bright line of who caused what certainly disappears. We now have in all of this continuing connection, eyewitness Eclipse, Bannon being purged, the purge goes on. We keep talking about how this stuff, these things move on through. It's always these concepts are just one after the other. How the government moves these things through, and underneath all these things that are going on, lots of actions going on to show us that at some point you have to look and say, that's just not a non-meaning coincidence. There's something going on here, and there's a plan behind it. The FBI is involved in lots of places. We've heard the story about the FBI helping mentally retarded people to be terrorists, and that's a major part of our news. No normal thinking man or woman would be caught doing any of that. And so you see how low the FBI has to stoop in the world in order to make some issue for you. And so I'm asking you folks that were over there in Charlottesville, when the informants of the FBI were inside your organization firing you up, how low of mentality do they think that you are, that you proved you were when you agreed with them to go out in the streets and riot that way? Is this story here, busted, parents catch FBI in a plot to force mentally ill son to be a right-wing terrorist? The FBI has informants and tries to insert itself where you are mentally deficient. I want all you all at Charlottesville and everywhere else that you might be that are infiltrated by the FBI to consider your mental health. Because the FBI will not use someone who's of any kind of a normal, common sanity. Someone who has a principle one in their mind. I want you to think seriously about that. If the FBI is amongst your ranks, you have to question your mental capacities. Because normal people aren't influenced by it. And they can't be influenced by it. But we have, again, fomenting by the government. We can go through the story, but the headline tells me more of all what I need. It should tell you the same way, but we could read how they go about doing it. It's very important to watch how. Why? You want to learn to see if someone you know is being groomed by the government itself to become the next news cycle. I was going to read it. I just looked up. I don't even know if I want to read it. That you need to go to the Blogcaster and read this stuff on how they take people that are incapacitated. In this case, this was so incapacitated the state had agreed this kid was incapacitated, diagnosed as schizophrenic. And the FBI had those records, knowing he was. And so they set up a situation which his folks say he would have never been able to capable of doing himself, has no ability to be that way. In fact, they have to care for him. He's so incapacitated by his illness or his response to the environment that they have to care for him. The FBI was still to get through that protection to cause this issue to happen. So the FBI works on mentally ill people. Again, I want you folks at Charlottesville and wherever else you protest, and you're hearing everywhere that there's FBI informants inside grooming you. You have to question your mental capacity. I'm just sitting here quiet. I just don't even know. We really are a sick bunch of people. We allow so much nonsense onto us, and then we complain. Or we disregard it. Or we just let it happen. Oh, it's over there. It's not happening. No, it's happening to all of us. If it's happening to somebody, it's happening to all of us. It's a ripple effect that goes through the society. The insanity that's pouring out into the streets is the insanity that's reflected by the society that allowed it. The FBI requires no different than they could go in on this they had to get the data on this kid to find out he was schizophrenic and susceptible to their influence and their program to make him feel that he had to go do something, or however they got him to do it, appealing to certain fears or paranoias in him. They had to have data to do that. And this is what I was telling you about. Big data by government is a serious thing. Big data by corporation may be more serious, as we see the ramifications of all that on how we communicate against ourselves and where it's used against us in ways that we may be invisible to us. There is a pattern, if we haven't heard about it before. There's more evidence now of more ways to get information from you when you're at your house, what you've done in your house as far as if it deals with electronics. I can tell you if there's any type of a waveform that is transmitted out and you interfere with that, that fluctuation can be seen by the coils or the inductances and capacitances that you provide. They can tell, I'm certain if they could, there's a couple devices in your house, I'm sure that if they knew what they were looking at, and I think they have ways of analyzing the signal that's generated, they can actually place you in the house someplace by looking at your capacitive or inductive reactance to anything that's in any machine that's in the house, and its relationship to where it is that the Roomba told them there was all about. But now we have the evidence of a patent exists to provide home surveillance using AMI smart meters. So smart meters are not too intelligent. If you needed more proof, here's another article. AMI, Advanced Metering Infrastructure, smart meters, AMI SMSs, are being forced to everyone's home, apartment, condo, and businesses in the United States with total disregard to numerous legal aspects, with one specifically egregious issue experiencing total abandonment of the disregard of the United States Constitution, plus individuals' rights under their respective home state's Constitution. I mean, I can go on and on. People can decide all this. These meters are no good. We were told before, I've told you before, they can check through these meters to find out what the signatures are by your electronic devices to figure out what's going on in your house and what you're doing at any one time. What they don't tell you about also is that these meters catch fire all the time. They really aren't built that well. And this has been a shock to me being through electronics. And we used to really have to pay attention to how, if you will, consumers or business or military applications burn in. We had burn-in rooms to make sure that this stuff just doesn't fail. And anymore, it doesn't matter. They're made to fail. And I'm talking way beyond planned obsolescence. They're just no quality control. So you have fires on your buildings, at your houses, and for because they think that they need this data more importantly than they want your safety, even though they say it's all for your safety. It's for the public safety. That's not your safety. That's the government safety. So there's a patent, more data capacity, gathering capacity against you in this battlefield we call America, in the fomenting of war in the streets. We bring on the idea of technology, bringing all this on for us. And like I said, I'm not against the technology. I think it's fantastic, properly used, but we're not the ones wielding these technological swords anymore, it seems. This story pops up, and it just bothered me to no end. On its surface, it's pretty neat, but when you see what's going on about the fabrication of things, informants working on the ignorance or the mental incapacity of somebody or the non-disclosure to somebody, you realize that the battlefield is a much more complex place, being that you are in it and you choose to move through it, to actually go against a wrong that you need to make right, and not the color of something. And I don't talk about color here. I'm talking about the taint that they put in your mind on something else that they've made as another group or race. Again, the example in Doubleday 1974 dictionary, and I've been looking for one. I used to have one. Can't find the one I thought I had. Is the example for the term race is the race of lawyers. And boy, oh boy, I got a lawsuit allows me to be a racist. I found out those jerks commit treason in the country of the United States of America. Yeah, I want those folks gone. So I'm a racist. So we all can be a racist. That's not the problem. Is what do we do? How do we act it out? What do we do with that knowledge? How do we let that drive us over our principles? And that's the problem. So this is another problem, is technology coming along, giving us information or thinking that we're being helped. Oh, the women and the children are going to be helped by this confiscation of a gun in Oregon. We've given you due process because we had someone able to walk to a judge and get a signature. Folks, how well has the protection of the Fourth Amendment been working for you generally, and then again where there's a terrorist around every corner? Remember, FISA courts don't care. They just signed the government agents, the same FBI that's setting up your mentally retarded offspring, or you standing in the street fighting the other opposition side. You all mentally ill people. You're all being taken advantage of. And so how much bigger a step is the next thing when we don't know? We're just doing our own life and not realizing this is all happening. And we want people to be helped, and there's technology to help us, so we wouldn't agree or be receptive to information that might help our lives. And this next story just chilled my blood. It always has this taint to it. It's no longer a wonder, our technology, to me. I don't know where this happened to me, but I realize it's all a weapon against us. Lifesaver, they claim here in this article. New blood test finds cancer before symptoms start. I just looked at that. That's like pre-crime in a way to me, folks, in a different way. If they can tell you that they can see cancer before the symptoms appear, they can tell you that they can identify anything that's in you before it appears, and you get to believe it. I mean, if I said I had a test that said you had cancer, and I was in a control position, couldn't I just go ahead and make lots of money off of you and just saying you're predisposed to cancer? And then guess about this one, folks. Remember your vaccines you all have cancer in them. So wouldn't that test actually be proving the fact that the cancer is coming from the vaccines that you all have? And then they could prescribe their pharmaceuticals to you. A new blood testing method could be able to give indications of cancer before symptoms manifest, though there's room for improvement on its accuracy. More than a handful of patients accurately had cancer identified in their bodies through the test. That statement terrified me. Nobody is immune from finding cancer. Well, we've also been told all this stuff's in our body. It's whether or not your body's healthy enough to fight it off, because your body's a really marvelous machine, really a miracle. And so there's some truth to the fact you can have all this stuff in you, but your body's fighting it off. And so if we have just cells that are cancerous, in other words, they've been mutated in the wrong way, we have that happening in our body all the time due to lots of different factors naturally, then this test would tell you have that. Well, what good is that though? See, they don't ever show you how healthy your body is to be able to resist it. They just tell you that it's there, and they put the fear in you, and you're going to say, oh, I want to stop that. Give me your pharmaceuticals. At any rate, neat stuff, but this test is, to me, it just is terrifying. This can be used for anything. Next week, they're going to be able to test that you are susceptible to cankles, and you're going to be looking like Hillary Clinton, and you're going to get the drug that stops that. You're going to, folks. You're just going to. Through scientists 3D print high-resolution living tissue. Okay, now we got high-resolution living tissue. There must be going down nano. I just remember when I saw 3D print high-resolution living tissue, folks, I was thinking about spinach people. Because spinach has a framework that they can attach cells that will allow a framework of organ construction. And so you're hearing how they're tying together the creation of beings made by a 3D printer. You know, quite a few other articles that I've read in the past broadcasts, many, going through back for many, many months. Oxford University science, it's always, again, these same studies, these same universities. Oxford University scientists have found a groundbreaking way to 3D print living tissue that could pave the way for regenerative medicine. Now, I have no problem with having people being able to fix organs that have gone bad. That's great stuff. But we're not talking about actually helping you. We're talking about possibly, remember, the artificial womb. Remember, the Matrix is not a movie. All that stuff. We're not talking about a bunch of people from these organizations that are thinking and caring about you. You just are the lab rat for them to move on to the next thing when you are obsoleted. The new way to 3D print stem cells to recreate complex living tissues was devised by these scientists in collaboration with Bristol's School of Cellular and Molecular Medicine. The discovery could revolutionize regenerative medicine as it allows the reproduction of complex tissue that could replace or repair damaged or severed areas of the body. Great stuff until you realize they're actually going to make a body. These are nanostein organisms or something like that. Franken nanos or something. They're just blood curdling here when you start to apply how they're going down and what they're doing with it ultimately. And so what do they take this technology and they say you are what you eat. Okay, fine. I mean, you could adulterate that statement and what it's really supposed to say, but okay, we'll go, well, you are what you eat. Well, all that is not, all that works correctly, I suppose. It's not excreted like those chemicals that don't bind up quite right, that they claim that they can tell you that the BPA is okay for you because it gets excreted. Don't talk to you about the stuff that don't. They don't tell you that if it's excreted, it means it was probably a poison to the body and had to be excreted because it was a poison. The body saw that. How miracle is that? So they got to feed you something in the future. When they make up your body, they got all your, they got you're made by a 3D printer, and they got your diet a certain way because that's the kind of device that you are. And so we have the question today: are these GMO meatless burgers safe to eat? Meatless burgers. That sounds like an oxymoron. Anyway, the FDA isn't so sure. Impossible Food doesn't even know everything in its product. And to me, this was confirming again what I told you about the problem with these GMOs, just generally. We don't know what is the collateral byproduct to the fabrication of technical tissue, technically made tissue, laboratory-made tissue. No different than we just heard. They can make a 3D printing. We don't know how the DNA is going to be utilized in order that is being adulterated by the process itself to find out when this organism and organs or whatever this creature is, this nano creature is they make, what its defects will be at the cellular or molecular level. They don't know. Here was the proof. FDA informed the manufacturer of Impossible Burger, a meat-like burger made using only plants, that it had not yet proven the product's key genetically modified ingredients is safe for consumption. The company, Impossible Foods, like an ad here, it's an impossible thing here that they've done too, but they're going to push it anyway, decided it knew better and launched the product anyway. For all y'all that are going to restaurants and eating it, bon appetit. The Impossible Burger is made using a GM form of protein called soy leghemoglobin. I'll get it. Leghemoglobin. Or heme. H-E-M-E. Which comes from the root nodules of soybean plants. And we all know about the problems with soybean. But here's it becomes a central globalist focus as they move their eugenics program and beyond eugenics into we're going to make up creatures that we're going to program them and make them up here by a 3D printer. But they're going to be genetically modified. And here this fact says, you make up this hamburger, which if you extrapolate it backwards used to be a body part somewhere. Right? This GMO fabricating organs, it's going to be hamburger eventually, as we talked about in past broadcasts. The company of which makes GMO can't tell you what's in it. They don't know. The reason why this became a question because they wanted to find out if the FDA would allow this to be generally considered as safe. And the FDA said, but you haven't given us any tests to show that it could be at all. And you have things that you can't test for, and you said that. An SLH gene is added to the yeast strain that is grown in vats using fermentation process. That sounds appetizing. Impossible Foods then isolates the heme from the yeast and adds it to the Impossible Burger, giving it a meat-like taste and blood-like red color. Impossible Foods says on its website that it is on a mission to make global food system more sustainable. If you didn't understand what I said earlier about its global connection. The company claims the Impossible Burger, quote, uses 75% less water, generates about 87% fewer greenhouse gases, and generates around 95% less land than conventional ground beef from cows. It's produced without hormones, antibiotics, or artificial flavors. The GMO faux meat burgers are available at 43 restaurants nationwide, including several burger chains. Keep eating there, folks. Run down and after talking about the fact of they wanted to get it generally recognized as safe, this thing they make. The FDA said believes that the arguments presented individually and collectively do not establish the safety of SLH for consumption, nor do they point to a general recognition of safety. The problem is also that it's only 73% pure. The other 27% is from proteins from genetically engineered yeast that produces it, and these have an unknown function. That confirms exactly to you what I've told you my problem with all of this GMO thing is, and what all the genetic people that I have asked about will not answer. You're hearing it here. 27% of what is involved in a genetic organism product has proteins that are unknown and of no known function. And yet this company produced this burger that's in so many restaurants nationwide. It's proof right here. GMO is not a problem. Now I want to tell you 27% unknown function of proteins. I know there's enzymes, there's all kinds of byproducts here. In an organism they create in a factory that they put in a womb that grows up to be a cop, folks. Okay. Think about that for a little bit. So now we got that in our face in the future, if not right now. We really, really hope you take stock. Those of you that fall into thinking you can even support the protesters in the street, they're being played, and those are being played because they're not having the capacity, sufficient mental capacity. You really got to rethink your position. I don't think that you have no insufficient mental capacity. I think we've been lulled into certain things that we needed to not be a part of. One thing that's very hard to not be a part of is how we make it through the day and how we get the stuff of our life, and that's been controlled by an economic system that we were born into long before us. Pretty genius people that figured out how to control nations. It wasn't just because they offered money to both sides in a war like the Civil War, the thing that Lincoln exploited, and the thing that proved to us that the people may not be strong enough against any kind of an organized military, and which has now been exploited and exported over the world now from the United States everywhere. And I make a distinction between the United States as a government and the United States of America, the countryside, and its people. And the people just couldn't do it. And they also couldn't control people manipulating what we call economy, what we call monetary policy, fiscal policy. Gentleman Charles Hughes Smith, I've recited a couple of his articles. I've had a couple problems with some insight he may or may not have had, but generally I find him to be pretty informative. And he has an article for us to consider. Another aspect of the war against us, why we're doomed, our economy's toxic inequality. So while you're supposed to suffer exactions of every kind equally, all the races of y'all, we got a color, whatever their type, whatever their ideology, whatever religion, we don't care. You're all going to be extorted from wrongly forever equally. That's all we care. That's what the Title 42, Section 1981 says, for those that refuse to go read it and think about what that says. For all y'all that'll stand on the street corner, protest the hammer and sickle versus the swastika, I don't know about you folks, really. But anyway, let's get on to Charles Hughes. Was it Charles Hughes Smith? He says he has his graphs and he has all his discussion. Now we'll get down to the point of it, folks. He makes the identification. Regardless of what he says all here and what he shows you and how he explains how unequal the economy has become. It's gone down not the top 1% like the Occupy Wall Street would have you believe. It's actually 1/100th of 1% that's actually in control, and the rest are on the other end of the scale, the so-called economic scale. How bad we've allowed this thing to go. He shows us that in one sentence, the whole of the answer. It's the whole of why we're here. It's the whole of what we have to avoid. It's the whole of why I press property rights, land rights, and wealth therefrom, taking advantage of Mother Nature's gifts that we properly develop. This is the wealth, and tying into that is the wealth. This is what the South was that should rise again. There weren't perfectnesses there. I'm not agreeing to certain things, but there was certain ways that things happened. Remember, the North had slaves too. The South had slaves, and the North benefited from the South's ability to produce food. And when you get down into the South, it wasn't all perfect. I've seen all the pictures, but there are certain truths that we're not told about how it did work. There weren't lots of times people couldn't do for themselves. They had to go to a place to work, and that was done by work contract. And so I'm not going to get into all that. I'm not getting into all that problem about what was also the lies over what was going on, why we even have the nation that we have, how it even got here, what adulterated it. Such a large discussion. One thing that destroyed all of us, though, was the enslavement of everyone. You see that statement right in Title 42, Section 1981, and then this other thing that kind of perfects itself in 1913 or so, roughly, and he identifies it here as the root of this disconnect. This disconnect this fundamental destabilization dynamic of the finance world from the real world economy. The root is in debt. I thought that statement right by itself was profound and poignant and to the point. Something I've told you all. The system is based in debt. Credit means debt. As long as we keep agreeing to that, we are a servant to it. Master, not a debtor be, is what I've said for years. As I made up that phrase to me when it occurred to me that when you find out the sovereign, you cannot be sovereign if you owe something. That's why I identified the so-called sovereign states when I identified they had obligations and duties to the people and to the land that was disposed to the people, the men and women, that we found out then, first of all, that the state couldn't be sovereign if their singular political construction, as we heard the purpose for the United States federal constitution was a political establishment, not the other facets of sovereignty. If that didn't show us that it's not actually a sovereign, this obligation and duty, this debt that's owed by the states to its people, shows it's not sovereign in that capacity either. What they've done is they've altered the capacity, the statuses, and they stuck you in all these races that they treat equally. That's why I suggest identify how you're not the thing they blame you to be, and find out who you really are. And the simplest way I can do behind the woodshed here is just to say, that's why it's simplest to say you're either a man or a woman. Develop a darn gender, folks. Don't go gender neutral. They're walking you right into the person that's subject, the legal entity that's subject to the regulation. A man or a woman is not. You have a gender. Embrace that. Stop playing this nonsense they're feeding us. But Charles U. Smith says debt is the disconnect. I've been telling you, stop it. Go find wealth. That's done by taking Mother Nature, developing what Mother Nature offers into something valuable or something other people value. That's going to require you find a medium of exchange that's not based in debt. We've heard that the Fed can't even take silver and gold coin as a debt or credit construction. It has to account for it on the asset side of its ledger. For all of you think that cryptocurrency, it's the big grand ledger. No, they run ledgers all the time. That's what accounting is. It just happens to be digitized now. For all you guys, folks, telling yourselves tale about that. This is just the next iteration of this global ledgering of things. The root of this disconnect is in debt. Folks, get out of it. Stop, reduce your use and reliance on debt instruments. He says it right there. Remove one of the leashes around our necks. It doesn't take trillions to run your life and the economy of your life. All you have to have is some gold and some silver coin that can't be identified as debt. Learn some of the things I've suggested on how you look into the world of what's law to protect yourself against those plunderers that are coming to steal it from you, because that's just been a fallen nature for all mankind. Folks, we're talking about the cryptocurrency problem, the ledgering. We're talking about the connection. We're talking about the globalization of it. This right after I got off the broadcast, what do you think? What the United States report comes out? The United States launches a quiet crackdown on cryptocurrencies. Quiet to everybody while we're all railing about certain things. There is plans afoot to do certain things to keep things in check. While all eyes are distracted with the Trump demeaning headlines of the foreign sanctions bill, few spotted the hidden mandate that foreign governments monitor cryptocurrency circulations as a measure to combat illicit finance trends in an effort to combat terrorism, fully ignoring the fact the government itself is the terrorist. But this shows you what, remember, they're foreign. Remember we were talking about the basket of currencies, the SDRs, the modernization of that into a convenient ledger. Right after the broadcast, we hear they're attempting the government's working legislation to control how and where that's going to be funneled through and for what. To monitor it means they can track it. It'll have to be trackable. If not, this is kind of like what they're telling you, oh, we got to give NSA or the CIA a backdoor to your computer. Well, they've already got it all, so what's the problem now? We're just going to keep track. And here's how the foreign governments are messed up on all this, where this is all a monstrous debt system. Everybody's in this debt, this stinking abyss. They just make it so you can't trade in those debt instruments, and there's nothing else going. They got the monopoly in town, and you're going to either do it or die. Comply or die. As simple as that. And so if you don't have the alternative to the very simple statement that Charles U. Smith says, it's in debt, and stop being in debt, and get out of her, my people, as we're admonished to do. Keep ourselves non-dependent of the system, as I've been identifying. We jump back to the land, start developing from there. Mother Nature will help things that are not accountable for within the debt system. You see how that ties and relates now, folks? Reason why it won't fit on a ledger, why the economy cannot account for a calf from a cow, is because it's not a debt thing. So at any rate, right after the broadcast, that story came up. The addiction to debt is killing us, folks. Addiction to anything is going to harm us. If we have no control over that, that'd be an experiment you should commit to yourself. Am I so addicted to this debt system that I can't function outside of it? And if you find out you're addicted to the system, you have to have you're going to have to fix yourself. Is all I can see this. And we're seeing this referenced. Remember, as you get addicted to certain things, your life is not controlled by you, it's controlled by others around you. No different than that Second Amendment thing. Well, if we think that you're a harm to yourself, we're going to make an affidavit ex parte by ourselves to a judge, and we're going to look at each other as a nod and a wink, and I'm going to come and take your stuff. And you know that's not going to go down too well, right, folks? You know that's not going down too well. You're a problem to the society anyway. But we're all addicted to this system. We're not learning how to keep it at distance. We're allowing the cocostocracy to rise up and continue this. We're addicted to the debt system. We're addicted to the drugs they give us. And here we come, the story, the Harvard study. Again, same university bringing this information for us. The ones running the scam, Big Pharma, U.S. government behind opioid epidemic. And why not? It's the biggest game in town, folks. It's the biggest scam running your life. We have to identify how this system of control is, where it's got its clutches, and how it works through and gets enforced and empowered to take you out. A new Harvard study reveals how Big Pharma and federal government have colluded to allow a current opioid epidemic in the United States. How are we going to, as a people, to be able to rise up and do the right thing and not do anything more with these opioids? Just be drooling on yourselves on some couch somewhere, underneath by some curb, I suppose. You're not going to even rise up. That Big Pharma is involved, again, the culprits in the organized criminal syndicate. I didn't want to read this stuff. I just read it. That title should be plenty, folks. If you're more interested, go to the blogcast or type it in. You can read it yourself. Look at what's going on. It's a dynamic you're looking for. It's not even, to me, it's not even about the opioids. It's about the government system. The people have gone inside the government system to use it for their benefit and prey upon you. And I'm not talking the religious prey. I'm talking about the meat-eating prey, the carnivore, the corporate carnivores out there. They're willing to make meat, folks. They're so hungry. You're getting all that, folks, how they do this to us. And we continue to allow it. Oh, they'll get us to go out in the streets and beat on each other while they're pulling all this stuff off. It's really fascinating. At some point, I got to laugh at it. It is a big joke to me. Just a big joke. How foolish are we? And we continue to be that way. And while we have a problem with the organized criminal syndicate and the government fostering and encouraging itself. No controls, notwithstanding all the controls against you and your property rights. Very interestingly, in the past week or a couple of weeks, there was news. A new bill would legalize weed at the federal level. Now, I'm wondering at some level whether or not they're finding out they really can't control. The big pharma can't really do what they thought they were going to do around weed. People aren't going to go for the GMOs. They're not going to go for the synthetics. None of that. None of it's working. You found out Mother Nature provides, or can. Well, what this story comes up and it actually talks to is really what we started out together, causing division. And upon division and divisive type of issues, causes are born to do an act which gets support. And so we impliedly agree with the underlying reason. I've told you under land law, there is no way that the United States government or any state government was supposed to come after the production of your land directly to the market. There is no actual lawful way for them to stop marijuana. And if you look very carefully, it had to do with commerce, not the production of it from a farmer. Now, there's a lot of argument that would be going on in that. I want to do that behind the woodshed. I can show you, it's clear that that would be within your realm, especially when you find out George Washington was growing it. They needed it for the ropes of the Navy and all that stuff. You can go right down that list. It doesn't matter. The point is that there's a fundamental law that's being violated in the law of the land, and it's being subverted by this commerce connection, this corporate commingling, if you will, inside the government. Those people got in and they start running for their own good, and they forgot to look out for you, and then you didn't object. But this weed law at the federal level, fair enough, I suppose, with the facts coming out, but it really wasn't about that. And I found this little story kind of interesting. A New Jersey Democrat Senator Cory Booker, Cory Booker, says he's introducing legislation to legalize marijuana at the federal level. He says the legislation is needed because the federal marijuana prohibition unfairly affects poor and minority citizens who he says are subject to arrest at greater rates than wealthier and white people. I'd rather refer to Dick Gregory. The problem is not black and white. The problem is right and wrong. But here this guy racizes this weed issue, which caught me a whole bit. Why you do that? See, it was wrong in the beginning just about regulating the marijuana, just from a production land use sense. Why do you go bring up race, fabricated race no less, as the problem? See, if you went to the beginning, you wouldn't have all this other negative fallout. But no, they got somewhere in the middle. They don't look at your property rights. No, we're going to fall off. Well, it's because it's a race problem. And I'm going to defer to Dick Gregory. Rest in peace. The revolution's not between black and white. It's between right and wrong. And this Democrat decided to go on black and white. He's black, by the way. See, if we had done this correctly, there would never have been the type of exactions placed on the people being they black or whatever at all. And when the answer comes from the legislator to make themselves look good, because that's the theme of the day, let's make it a black and white racial problem, he falls way short of the law. And so I'm not willing to engage his purpose in agreement, notwithstanding the fact that it appears, it's always been wrong to interfere with production from the land. And as I've explained to you, how pot has never really actually been illegal unless you were the one in commerce with it. And I will remind you, production to market is a constitutional protected right. That's not commerce. And I hope you heard that. A lot of people don't quite get that when we're talking. A lot of people we talk to in seats of decision kind of look at you, kind of crinkle up their nose and say, what are you talking about? Because we've been so misinformed about how things are actually done in a Republican form representative government. No, what we get is the mentally deficient people that make all the news, the extreme side, making all the news, causing a big ruckus, the wrong way that we have to believe we have to shun, take a side, take no sides, embrace both sides, and it's still the wrong way. Still the wrong way. And moving along on how things are done in Oregon with the wrong, it looks like that law has got many major problems interfering with the Second Amendment rights without a first judicial jury hearing identifying the one in question actually has and is subject to that law. No, they do it ex parte in summary trials, completely violative of the constitutional power, but no one seems to want to care about that, so they get away with it. There's been, I have a tab along with the production and the land use. There's been a tab on my board for months and months now. I just can't ever get to it. I got enough time I can get to it now. It relates to this production thing, marijuana, the federal laws for marijuana being given license. But see, they do the license. They want to make it legal at the federal level. But for what? For a wrong reason. A reason that wouldn't exist had it been done correctly in the beginning. And we start buying into that wrong reason. And I'm not willing to do that, and I'm not willing to let my listeners get away with not hearing that problem, because this is how they get us refocused on lesser reasons than what the principle ought to be. What's been riding underneath a lot of this is a state control. You see, always state control. It doesn't matter to me which state. It's still going to be government control when the Republican form of representative government was for the people from the bottom up, from the land production up, not interfered with in commerce. You were free in there. Now, once you started to make profit, then what happened is there was some, and this is arguable in my sense, but I'll just have to go with it for the sake of the discussion here. Once you started making profit, there was people that got greedy, and it was partly because of the people that done wrong being greedy that regulations came on in commerce to cut down that greed-driven harm that was caused. But production never causes a harm, actually. Well, it can cause a harm by overproduction. And there's some side problems sometimes with how you produce, but those are not so hard to deal with either. They're just made to look like they're hard. But one of the problems with the law not respecting, the government not respecting the law, violating its obligations and duties, overstepping what the law would allow, causing problems, is this thing I've been having on my tabs for a long time. I'm going to address it summarily like I have to here. Oregon lawmakers debate whether to study federal to state land transfers. I wanted to touch this a little bit. Again, lawmakers, LegisLooters, taking it on themselves to study something that they have no right to study. And we know that if you go look at your enabling acts, the acts that made your states that were territories before that, every one of those I've seen in the West said that the land was ceded to the United States government, and it was for the purpose of disposal back to the people. And the reason for that was because the people of the time were so intelligent, literally so intelligent, they understood that if they gave the right to the state to dispose of the property of the people within the state, that the state could in the future claim that it didn't disclose a remainder interest in the land to regulate it, to tax it, to encumber it, to do whatever it to take it, to do whatever it wanted to, whether it be the surface estate or the dominant estate. And the people back then said, we're not going to let the state even try that. But as we get formed from a territory to a state, we're going to cede this land to the federal government with the condition it's going to dispose it back to the people so that it's free and clear of all and every encumbrance. So you have your land free and clear of government interference, and that land is disposed to you for production, is the point here. You can produce from your land what you can lawfully produce, and I don't mean the outlawing of weed. That's a plant. I'm talking about you can't do things that are harmful from your property and make those happen. That's never been under. It's like one of those natural laws you just don't do. But the Oregon lawmakers debate whether to transfer federal to state land transfers is, on its face, a misappropriation of public funds without a warrant for the state to do so, because to think about it is a breach of the reason why the state exists under its agreement to give the land to you by way of the United States government to keep the land free from interference of the state. See, they want something here. They want control of that land, and they want it under your common progressive ideas that you have to have common sense use. And that common sense use puts the environment before production, and it disposes of the idea that production actually makes for good environment. Because these people are insane. They are mentally deficient. They're the type of people the FBI works on in order to get the things and agendas pushed through that they want with the people that riot in the streets. These people they call this place in Oregon, the Capitol building is called the Marble Nut House. That's not a name I made up. I heard it from somebody while I was standing there on the steps years and years ago. So I wanted to point out, they make this news that these lawmakers, you think they have the right to do the study. No, it's a waste of time and energy. There's no lawful capacity that they can actually do this. If it ever gets done, it'll be a violation of law. I'll hear crickets. We've been arguing that it can't be done. We've been arguing just start disposing the land to the miners and the ranchers and the farmers and the timber haulers, the timber people that can manage that correctly. There's a big problem around timber because it's easily thieved, and that is a legitimate problem, but that's not the rest of the land. The miners have to go work. The ranchers have to be there. It's a lot of work. You want sage grouse? Put the ranchers back on the forest. Don't kick them out. Put the cows back in the forest. Where water and cows and ranchers work, sage grouse shows back up. They're complaining about the sage grouse not working, not living, because they've been kicking out all the producers. Self-inflicted wound. And these are the idiots here in the Oregon LegisLooters that have caused all that. I wanted to touch base on how government purports to take an authority it has no right to take, and we're crickets to it. And this is diminishing every one of you all, because this is a big ripple effect. We're talking about the foundation of our nation comes from its production, from its land, and the people that do that. There's a certain expertise in those people, I'll have to tell you as well. It's not like you don't just go learn in a book and go do this stuff. There's a whole thing that Mother Nature will educate you on all your life around the issues with dealing with Mother Nature. And if you don't respect her in that, you aren't around long. You might become one of them Darwin Awards as well, beneficiaries. So there's a certain thing that we've been lied to about. Government takes certain liberties that it doesn't have, and we're crickets to it. And then I think what we see is what we're now finding out we're living under today, which is a mass division on many, many, many levels, because no one understands what the underlying principle for it all is. And we are diminished in our mental capacity, and that's exploited. And if we're not going to hold our mental capacities up and enforce that for ourselves, we can plan to be exploited against. It's another weapon that's used against us. And as long as I'm hearing crickets, I'm sad, because that means that we are not mentally sufficiently capable in order to not be the crickets. That's the clueless that takes what they gave. And it's going to be a sad day in the future when everyone finds that out. We have it in our hands to change, and it is in our hands to do. As a republic, if we kept it, and I've been trying to focus this on a narrow path of the mining law and the property law, because that gives us a firm example of how that all works. Hope I said something today that helps you out, gets you advance you to the next point, gets you involved. It's not the revolution, it's not black or against black or white. It's about what's wrong that needs to be made right. Thank you, Grimner, for what you do at reallibertymedia.com and archives and whatever, all the services there. freedomsnetwork.com, social network you can tie in. Remember, I'm at minds.com as well. BitChute, we've got YouTube. Vince helps to do that. UCY.tv. Jules, thank you very much for the pre-prodcast and recasts and pastcasts. And thank you very much. I'll be here next week. Tech Diffs, nature willing.
Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony. Till next time, journey with purpose.
Well, that's what opening up a can of whoop-ass feels like.
Son, you just opened a whole case of whoop-ass.